Hello everyone. In this video we are going to look at the trend in terms of the oxidizing and reducing nature of the elements. So here we will also discuss about what do you mean by the oxidizing nature and what do you mean by the reducing nature of the elements. Okay. But before we get into the discussion of oxidizing and reducing nature, we need to understand something on what we call as the hydration or solvation. So we will be able to see what is the importance or what is the relation of this to the oxidizing and reducing nature of the elements. So let us look at the concept of what we call as a hydration or solvation. So what is this? So if you look at any ion, let's say we have a cation or we have an anion. When it is put into a polar solvent like water, so what does water will have? So water will consider it as a polar solvent. So the oxygen will have a partial negative charge. So we will discuss about this in chemical bonding in detail. But here because oxygen is more electronegative, the bond will have some partial ionic nature. So we will be calling it as what? Polar covalent bond. So it will have a negative charge. Oxygen will be having negative charge, partial negative, and hydrogen will have partial positive charge. That's why we will keep it as what? Delta. Okay. Now the oxygens, right, because oxygen is partial negative, cation is what? Partial positive. So all the oxygens will arrange themselves as if they are facing close to the cation. So you can see there will be some kind of a layer. Okay, not just one layer. If oxygens are approaching closer to the cation, right, you can have one more layer of particles being formed. So you can have multiple layers. It is not just about one layer of the water molecules getting surrounded. You can have multiple layers of water molecules getting surrounded. That can happen. So we will call this process as the hydration or solvation. The phenomena of an ion being surrounded by the solvent or water molecules, right? Because of what reason? Owing to the polarity of the solvent or water molecules. Since water is a polar solvent, right? That is the reason why the solvent, in this case water we are discussing, will be able to surround the ions. Okay. Similarly, if it is a negative ion, means the hydrogen part of the water, right, that will be coming closer to the ion. Why? Because hydrogen part will be partially positive. Oxygen part is partially negative and hydrogen part is partially positive. Like this we will be able to see the arrangement of the water molecules. The partially positive hydrogens will come closer. Okay, so this phenomena, right, will be resulting in a release of energy. So we will discuss about it in detail, but this phenomena, right, what is this phenomena going to result in? It will be resulting in release of energy. Okay, and we are going to be calling this as hydration energy. What do we call it as? We will call it as what? Hydration energy. Now the hydration energy, right, is the energy released when an isolated gaseous ion gets hydrated. So if you have, say for example, Na plus in the gaseous state, it is taken into water. It will be what? Na plus aqueous it becomes. So Na plus aqueous means what? That Na plus is being now surrounded by water molecules. It is hydrated. So the enthalpy change involved here is what we call as the enthalpy of hydration. Since it is energy released, right, enthalpy change is going to be what? Negative. So when we do the hydration of cation, the enthalpy change will be what? Negative. Similarly, when you have anion, like chloride ion in the gaseous state, we put this into water, it becomes what? Cl minus aqueous. The Cl minus aqueous also, right, when it is being surrounded by water molecules, when it is getting hydrated, energy is going to be again released. So here also the enthalpy of hydration of the anion part also is going to be what? Negative, because it is going to be energy release. Okay, and the importance of the hydration energy, right, we will see when we will look at the oxidizing power of non-metals and reducing power of metals. And also we will be able to understand about the importance of the hydration energy when it comes to solubility of the salts, in particularly water. So why some salts are more soluble in water, why some of them are less soluble, we will be able to relate it to the hydration energy. But here in this particular segment, right, we are going to focus on what? How the hydration energy is linked to the oxidizing power of non-metals and reducing power of the metals. Okay. Now, while we talk about the hydration, like the way we mentioned, right, there will be these layers of water molecules in this case. Like if you see the Na plus, the negative part of water molecule. So here we are just looking at it like what, there is one side negative part, other side positive part. We are not totally giving the water molecule shape over there. Okay, so since Na plus is positive, right, the negative part of the water molecule will be approaching closer like this. You see there is one more layer. Okay, so the second layer that is getting formed, right, and there can be multiple layers. It is not like we'll be able to actually count what is the number of layers in each and every case, but there can be multiple layers of the water molecules that will be surrounding. So if you try to look at these layers, right, we will be calling the layer that is very close to the ion, we'll call it as the inner hydration sphere, and the one that will be in the periphery we'll call it as what, outer hydration sphere. Hydrated radius or hydration radius is basically the distance from the nucleus of that ion to the point to which the associated water molecules are immobile due to the attraction, which means we are measuring the distance from the center of the nucleus of that particular ion to what, to the periphery of the outer hydration sphere. Up to that particular distance is what we will be calling as the hydration radius. Now hydration radius, right, is important in explaining things like mobility, conductivity, because based on mobility we will get conductivity, conductivity of the ions, right. In solution, when they are present in solution, this hydration radius is going to be a factor of consideration, because we will no longer be able to compare with the actual radius, because the actual radius will not make any sense now. Why? Because when we want to look at the size of Na plus, right, it is no longer the actual size of sodium, because along with sodium the inner hydration sphere and the outer hydration sphere, everything is going to move on. Okay, so we will have to be looking at what is the hydration radius or hydrated radius of the ions. So this is what is the definition of an hydration radius. What is it? From the center of the nucleus of that particular ion, right, to the periphery of that outer hydration sphere. That is what we will be calling as the hydration radius. Okay, now along with hydration radius we also have one more property called as hydration number. What is hydration number? If you look at Na plus, right, let's say it is surrounded by X number of water molecules. Like when think of a representation like this, Na, which is surrounded by X number of H2O. Overall, what is the charge? It is plus. Similarly, Cl surrounded by Y number of water molecules. What will be the representation? Cl, H2O, Y times overall minus. So the number of water molecules that are associated with a particular type of ion, right, when it is getting hydrated, is what we call as the hydration number. So this number, we may not be able to get and remember for all these ions, but this is what we'll generally call as the hydration number. See, when there is more hydration means what? This is how we look at it. More hydration means what? How do we know more hydration? If X is more or Y is more, that is when we will say there is a more hydration, isn't it? More hydration means what? More number of water molecules will be associated with that particular type of ion. Okay, so this is what is the concept of hydration number. Now, if you talk about what are the factors that will influence the hydration. So factors that will influence the hydration. See, the hydration factors means what? We'll talk about whether it is the hydration energy or hydrated radius or hydration number. All of them, right, are going to be depending upon the surface charge density of the ion. What do you mean by surface charge density? It is nothing but charge by area. It is nothing but charge by area. Okay, so in fact, if you think about it, right, think of the actual ion. Let's say we have an Na plus. We can think of like a sphere. What is that surface area means? The surface area means what? Generally for a sphere, what is surface area? 4 pi r square. We are talking about the actual radius. Okay, so if the charge, it may be unit positive, unit negative, di positive, di negative, like that. Okay, whatever is the charge for the corresponding ion. So the charge by area, that is, we'll take it as 4 pi r square. This is what we call as surface charge density. And when we want to compare between the ions, right, here charge will be corresponding to what? Valency. divided by, when you want to compare means 4 pi will be anyway common for all the ions, right? The only thing is what? We will compare this with what? Valency by r square. Valency by radius of that particular ion square. So wherever the radius is less, in that particular case, if say for example we are trying to compare between the ions of the alkali metals, all of them the valency is same 1. They are all having unit positive charge. The difference will be coming in the radius only, right? Which will have least radius. Lithium is going to have the least radius, which means in that particular case the sigma is going to be very high. When sigma is high, right, what does it mean? It means that lithium plus is going to be hydrated very heavily. It is going to release large amount of hydration energy. At the same time, its hydration number is also going to be more. Similarly, when it comes to the second group, right, all of them you can see charge is same for all of them. Beryllium, magnesium, calcium, strontium, barium, all of them charge is same. But which is having the least radius? Beryllium 2 plus, right? In that case, so as the radius is increasing means what? Surface charge density will decrease. Means the hydration radius, everything is going to be decreasing. Similarly, when we talk about the halogen ions, right, F minus, Cl minus, Br minus, I minus, in that also what is the observation? As we go down the group, radius is increasing. Here, all of them have the same numerator. The only difference is coming in the denominator, right? Radius is increasing means sigma will decrease. So everything will decrease. Hydration energy will decrease. Hydration radius will decrease. Everything is going to decrease. We can even look at the comparison between Fe2 plus and Fe3 plus. Here what is it? Same ion, iron, but one is Fe3 plus. Fe3 plus means what? It is having higher charge. Numerator is more. So Fe3 plus case, what is the numerator? 3 will come. Fe2 plus means what is the numerator? Only 2. So Fe3 plus will have a higher amount of hydration than Fe2 plus. So this is about comparison of the factors that will be able to influence the hydration of the ions. Now the other parameter that we talk about in case of ions, especially considering that the ions in water, when they are dissolved in water, right, they will be able to conduct current. So we will see that they have this electrolyte behavior. So whenever these ions are moving, right, we will talk about the ionic mobility. So ionic mobility is basically what? It is the ability of an ion to move in an aqueous solution. If you have larger hydrated radius, means what? The mobility is going to be less. So the ionic mobility, generally what? Small ion means it will be able to move easily. But here the size is not about the actual size of the ions. We have to compare with what? The hydrated radius. Because it is not just the ion, the cation or the anion, it is not just about the ion, but including the water molecules surrounding it. So we have to compare it with what? Hydrated radius. So ionic mobility will be inversely related to the hydrated radius. Means what? More the hydrated radius, mobility is going to be less. Means if the size is big, means what? Mobility will be lesser. As simple. Okay, so this is about the ionic mobility. Now we will come to the core aspect of discussion, which is the reducing nature of the so here we talk about reducing nature means we will talk about the reducing nature of particularly the metals. So what do you mean by the reducing nature or reducing power? Again, we will discuss about this particular idea when we go to oxidation reduction chapter also, or the redox reaction chapter. Okay, but here we will try to understand what is this reducing nature basically, and also we will look at how the hydration is going to play a role in determining the reducing power or reducing nature of the elements. If we talk about metals, right, what is one inherent property of the metals? They can easily lose electrons, and losing electrons, right, you take any metal, okay, so it can lose electrons to form cation. So losing electrons is what we call as oxidation. So we'll say what? The metal is getting oxidized. And if it is losing means this electron has to be taken by some other substance, right? Means what? In the process, they are able to reduce other element or other substance. And hence the metals are supposed to have what? Reducing nature. So since they are able to reduce the others, we say what? They are having reducing nature. And that is the reason why we also call them as what? Reducing agent or reductant. So we can call the metals as what? Reducing agents or reductants. Now the thing is, how do we determine what is the reducing power or how good is the reducing nature of that metal? Because see, why that reducing nature is coming? Because the metal itself is able to easily lose electron, isn't it? Now low ionization energy of a metal means what? It means the metal is able to easily lose electron, isn't it? So broadly what we think is, low ionization energy of metal mean the metal can easily lose electron and reducing power will be high. This is one of the straight understanding that we will have. But when we talk about the overall reducing nature of a metal, right, it is not just going to be depending upon ionization energy. It is not like straight away low ionization energy means good reducing agent. There are other factors also. What are those factors? For that we need to understand what is the overall process that goes on. So what is the overall process that we need to consider? It will happen in sequence of steps. Starting from where? Starting from the metal which is in the solid state. Look at it. What is the first step? Metal in the solid state has to convert itself into metal atoms in the gaseous state. We can call it as what? We can call it as sublimation, because solid to gas we will call it as what? Sublimation, correct? Then metal in the gas state will lose electron to form cation. This is what we call as the ionization. So this is what we have talked about it before. And the overall process, the ionization is just one part. And now these metal ions in the gaseous state, they will undergo what we call as hydration or solvation. Means what? If they are dissolved in water means they will be surrounded by the water molecules. That is the last step. So this process is basically what? It explains how the metal ions are being formed in the solution, or we will say the reducing nature of the metals in solution. We will say what? The reducing nature of the metals in solution. Okay. So what are the energy steps that will be involved? First step, right? Metal solid, we want to convert this into metal in the gaseous state. You know, we call it as what? The enthalpy change of sublimation, solid to gas straight. Here the enthalpy change will be positive, because when you want to convert a substance to, say for example solid to liquid, we want to convert, we have to heat it, right? We have to supply energy. Solid to gas means we have to supply energy. So for this sublimation, right, for the sublimation we are seeing here, it is going to be what? Enthalpy positive process. The second step is what? Ionization. That is also enthalpy positive. So there also we have to supply energy. The only step where the energy will be released, and that is the determining step. The only step where the energy will be released is basically the hydration or the solvation. Because when the gaseous metal ion is getting into the water, that hydration is going to be what? Release of energy. That is enthalpy negative. So when you want to decide on the overall reducing nature of any metal, right, we have to take into account all the three energies. So it is going to be depending upon what is this delta H net. What do you mean delta H net? Delta H sublimation plus delta H ionization plus delta H hydration. That net value is what is going to be determining. Now when we compare the alkali metals reducing power, right, alkali metals reducing power, it will be increasing down the group. From sodium to potassium to rubidium to cesium, it will be increasing down the group. Like the way we will think about using the concept of ionization energy. So as we go down the group, what happens? Ionization energy will decrease. Means, the metal will be able to easily lose electron. That is the understanding we have. But what we should keep in mind is, it is not just about the ionization, but other factors also will be required to analyze the reducing power or reducing nature of the metal. While the normal trend, what is the normal trend? We are seeing sodium less than, potassium less than, rubidium less than, cesium. As we go down, the reducing nature is increasing. But lithium is not the least. Lithium is in fact what? The highest. Why is it happening? It is happening because of the overall consideration. Lithium, due to its small size, remember what we have seen, the sigma surface charge density of that lithium is what? Very high. It's exceptionally high. As a result, what we'll have is large hydration energy of lithium. So large hydration energy of lithium, right, is the reason for exceptionally high reducing power of lithium. Similarly, in the second group, right, we will see that the beryllium is going to be having exceptionally high reducing nature. It is because again what? The exceptionally high hydration energy of that beryllium because of its small size. So this is what we will have as the reducing nature or reducing power. Again, when we go to the S block elements, right, there we will talk about the trend in general and also the exceptionally high values of the reducing power for both lithium as well as beryllium. Okay, so this is about the reducing nature or reducing power of the metals. Now the other side of it is the oxidizing nature. Non-metals, they easily gain electrons, which means what? Gaining electrons. If you have a non-metal, let's say there is a non-metal A, it is gaining electrons to form an anion. This process is what we call as reduction. So losing electrons is oxidation, gaining electrons is called as what? Reduction. We'll again touch base on this particular idea when we go to the redox reaction chapter. Okay, there the idea of oxidation reduction, right, the definitions also have changed over a period of time. What we are using here is the definition of oxidation reduction based on electrons. Losing of electrons is oxidation, gaining of electrons is reduction. Okay, now when the non-metals are gaining electrons, right, what is going to happen in the process? When non-metal is gaining means somebody must be losing, right? Means they are oxidizing the other element, and hence what we say, they have oxidizing nature. The non-metals are having what? They are able to oxidize others, means they have oxidizing nature. That is the reason why we can call non-metals also as what? An oxidizing agent or oxidant. We can call the non-metals as what? An oxidizing agent or an oxidant. Okay. Now when we look at the overall process that is involved in the demonstration of oxidizing nature of a non-metal, so these are the steps that will be involved. Say for example, we will talk about a halogen. Okay, so if we talk about halogen, half a mole of that halogen gas, because halogen will be in like what? It will be in the diatomic gaseous state, right? Half a mole you take gaseous molecules, it will not be atoms. First there will be what? The atomization. The molecules have to be dissociated. There has to be what? Atomization. The half a mole of molecules will give rise to what? 1 mole of atoms. Okay, so we'll get what? 1 mole of atoms. Now the second step is what? The gaseous atoms will gain electrons. What is this? This is the electron gain enthalpy or electron affinity. Remember, what do you call it as? 1 mole of gaseous atoms, when they accept electron into the outermost shell, the enthalpy change involved is basically what we call as the electron gain enthalpy. Okay, and what we see is the first step is what? An energy requirement process. Atomization, we want to break the bonds, it will be requiring energy. Enthalpy change is what? Positive. Enthalpy of atomization is what? Positive. What about the electron gain enthalpy? Negative. When you add electron, right, except for few cases, remember, we have to recall the thing that we discussed in the electron affinity or electron gain enthalpy trend. Remember, most of the cases the first electron gain enthalpy will be what? Negative. Exceptions are what? Exceptions are like inert gases, beryllium, magnesium or nitrogen. Okay, maybe you can just go back and check that video again. So this is about the second step. Third step is what? These gaseous anions, they will not be in the gaseous state. Again we will have the hydration step. They will be put into the water and they will undergo what? Hydration. Enthalpy of hydration will be what? Negative, because here also the energy will be released. Now the thing is, when we look at the overall oxidizing nature of the non-metal, this is going to again depend upon what? This delta H net. It is going to be depending upon what? Delta H net. So the overall delta H net means what? Delta H atomization plus delta H electron gain enthalpy plus delta H hydration. On the delta H net only we will be able to decide on which is good oxidizing power and which is having less oxidizing power. Okay, so here we look at one very important question, because this question we may see again in +2 when we go to the P block elements, right? When we talk about the 17th group halogens, we may even check the same question again over there also, okay, because this is a very important theoretical question. So look at this. Fluorine is more powerful oxidant. Remember, these non-metals, we can call them as what? Oxidizing agents or oxidants. Fluorine is more powerful oxidant than chlorine despite low electron affinity. Remember the abnormality of that second period elements, right? Abnormality of the second period elements in terms of the electron affinity. Because of their exceptionally small size, the incoming electron will be repelled. As a result of it, we would not get that much amount of energy when we add electron to the fluorine. So normally what should happen? That electron affinity must decrease as we go down the group. So what is expected is theoretically fluorine more than chlorine, more than bromine, more than iodine, like that. But chlorine is going to be more than fluorine. Why? Because due to the small size of the fluorine, that repulsions of existing electrons and incoming electron, right, will not result in the expected amount of energy release. That is why electron affinity value of not only fluorine, the other second period elements, oxygen will be less than sulfur, okay, then nitrogen will be less than phosphorus, like that. All the second period elements, right, in that P block, carbon is less than silicon, okay, boron will be less than aluminum. All the second period elements, right, they'll have lesser electron affinity than the third period elements. We're talking about only the P block part, okay. But the question is what? Why, despite having low electron affinity, fluorine is able to act as a powerful oxidant than chlorine? The reason is, like we said, that oxidizing nature is not going to be demonstrated just based on the electron affinity value. So what are the steps that will be involved? The steps are, first is what? The diatomic fluorine should undergo what? Atomization. There will be energy requirement. What is it? Half a mole, right? So we'll have half of the heat of dissociation. Then the atoms, electron will be added, gaseous atoms will form gaseous ions. What is it? Electron affinity, that will be negative. Then the gaseous ions will get into the aqueous solution, they will get hydrated, then we'll have hydration energy, that will be negative. The overall delta H net will be equal to what? It will be the summation of these three enthalpies. What is it? It will be the value of delta H2 and delta H3, which will be energy released. So here what is it? Energy released. Here what is it? Energy released. But the H1 is what? Energy absorbed. So we'll do what? H2 plus H3 minus H1. We have to subtract it, okay, when we are taking along with the sign. Now what we will be able to see is that overall oxidizing nature of fluorine is going to be depending upon what? It is going to be depending upon delta H net value. So yes, electron affinity values, this delta H2 is less, but on account of the small size, rate of F minus, remember sigma is what? The valency divided by the 4 pi r square, or area, okay. So fluorine will have very small radius. So as a result of it, what happens? The sigma value is going to be very high for fluorine in comparison to the chlorine. Due to this, what we'll see, the hydration of fluorine is going to be exceptionally high, which means what? The hydration energy, this H3 part, is going to be very high. Yes, electron affinity is less, but hydration energy is exceptionally high. Because of this, what we see, because we have to look at not just about one energy part, we have to look at the delta H net. So the delta H net for the fluorine is what? It is going to be overall highly exothermic. It's going to be overall highly exothermic. That is the reason why fluorine will be able to act as a powerful oxidant than chlorine. Okay, so here what we need to see is there are three energy steps involved. First is what? Dissociation, that is energy requirement. Second is what? Electron affinity, energy released. Third is also energy released, hydration. In case of fluorine, electron affinity value is less than chlorine, okay, but that hydration energy is very high because of the small size of fluorine, and that is why the delta H net is favorable for fluorine than chlorine. And we'll see, hence fluorine will be able to act as a powerful oxidant than the chlorine part. Okay, so this is about the oxidizing nature and reducing nature of the elements, and we'll see in the next part video.